Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Insider Power Hour. I am so glad that you're here today. And today's subject matter is inflammation. Um, we have been hearing a lot about inflammation and the really detrimental health benefits to inflammation. And there are two phases of inflammation. So today we're going to talk about what is inflammation. We're going to talk about the signs and symptoms of acute inflammation versus chronic inflammation. We're going to talk about inflammatory triggers, things that start this whole immune response that leads to chronic body-wide inflammation. And then we're going to talk about things we can do to fix it. Really, I have a really nice tool that we'll actually get to explore in detail. It's called the risk uh, inflammatory score. So we're actually going to have a worksheet where we're going to apply a numerical value to each of the symptoms or conditions you may be currently experiencing and gives you an inflammatory risk score. That'll tell you whether or not you have a little bit of heat going on or a five-alarm fire, and what do you need to do to fix that. So let's get started. And then once we're finished with this educational part, we'll move into our private group class where we'll have some discussions about these kinds of things. And of course, share your experience. And if you have any questions, you can type those in the chat box. So I am going to pause my recording for just a minute while I share my screen. Okay, so the first thing that I want to bring up to you is exactly what is an inflammatory cascade or inflammatory response. So the definition of inflammation is the body's defense to an acute attack. We've all had this experience. We've had a cut, we've had surgery, we've had an injury, and the immune system then goes into play. And there are a lot of things that are involved in the immune system. And some of those things are listed on this graphic, which we'll go through. The white blood cells, the lymphocytes, the eosinophils, the neutrophils. There are complement proteins. There are interleukin. And you may have heard, and cytokines, pro-cytokines. You may have heard some of this terminology over the last year because of the attack on our immune systems from a new virus that has come out. So the way our body responds is not new. And it's prepared, and it's always preparing and looking out for things that may cause damage to you. So we're going to talk about what really happens in this, and this is really an acute or a chronic inflammatory response. So just like anything, when we talk about acute stress, we talk about acute infections. When things move into a chronic state, that's where we really get in trouble. The body has backup systems, and the immune system, if you've done any kind of investigation into the immune system, it's pretty complicated. It's pretty amazing too, because it has a plan for everything, but it can't go on forever. And you can't continually assault a particular body system and expect it to go on in forever and ever. It needs support. And that's what we do in functional medicine is we support and balance the immune systems and all the body systems so they can work together quite nicely. So we start here. We have some sort of chronic or an acute inflammation, acute attack that has now moved into chronic. And if we have leaky gut, we know that nearly 90% of our immune system is located in our gut. We've had some discussions about that. And if we need more information about that, well, I can talk about that in another Insider Power Hour. So we have this increased blood flow, the neutrophils, the monocytes, the macrophages, the antibodies. This is the first line. These are the first wave in. And if you're a military personnel, I believe that's the Marines. Boom, they're the first ones in, right? So these guys come in and they go, okay, something's wrong, and they pay attention. They try to fight it. They take an assessment of the situation. They try to immediately calm things down. If that doesn't happen, then we get into a much more detailed activation of the immune system. Clotting, platelets, fibroblasts, prostaglandins. Prostaglandins have a lot to do with menstrual pain and irregularities, leukotrienes, those are the interleukins, things like that. These are really detailed. There's so many. I have 3 pages of interleukins that are activated, and they all do something different. They all work together. They're all activated in different situations. So what do these guys do? Well, they come in and they take care of the damage. They heal the wound. They, in cases of cancer and things like that, they will activate natural killer cells, tumor necrosis factor. I mean, they have a complete system to handle anything that's going on. And then healing happens. And then we have then some memory. They basically go back and they kind of write down, oh, this was the recipe that we used. These are all the players. This is everybody that came in to help. Let's remember that, because if it happens again, we want to prepare for the next time right here. This is adaptive immunity. It gets ready for another attack that's similar or exactly like that. That's why preserving and supporting the immune system is so critically important. And the immune system has to have these abilities to put this whole process together when there is an acute attack, because that's how it learns and moves forward in helping new situations like we've just been all exposed to. So exposure is not necessarily a bad thing. Exposure is a learning process, and it is a chance to put all the players in place that help to put this very effective immune system into place. The problem comes again when we start to see these chronic conditions, these chronic diseases that Hashimoto's thyroiditis, that is an antibody. That is an autoimmune situation attacking your own body. Infertility, chronic fatigue. Not on here, which I'm very surprised, is cardiac disease. We know that cardiac disease, plaque formation, atherosclerosis, well, there it is right there, atherosclerosis, is in the lining of the vascular system. So the immune system is everywhere. So let's talk about a little bit here about what is the the really the top 6 foods actually that create inflammation. And why is it important that we know this? Well, because we have access to these foods all the time, and we have to make an informed choice, in my opinion, so that we know whether or not we are causing a chronic stress response, or are we supporting a proper functioning immune system? Sugar. I mean, I'm going to do another talk on sugar. This is critical. Sugar does a lot of stuff. Well, I have a slide that we're going to talk about what sugar really does to the body. And I'm sure you've heard these kind of talking points that sugar is as addictive as cocaine. It lights up the brain's reward centers. And that's all true. It does do that. Well, how does sugar really affect the body and cause this chronic immune response? We'll talk about that. Of course, when we have refined sugars, more sugar, we increase adipose tissue fat. Fat increases something called arachidonic acid and aromatase. Those 2 things are signals to the immune system that inflammation is happening, and it starts that whole process. So it's not only what we're eating, it's how it's triggering your immune response. Trans fats, artificial trans fats, vegetable seeds and oil, we're going to talk about that a lot, because vegetable seeds and oils like sunflower oil, safflower oil. Those two things can contribute to a amino acid or an omega 6 acid called linoleic acid. Americans have a very high amount of linoleic acid in their diets because it is in anything that comes in a box or a bag. So when we have a high amount of that, even though it's an omega-6, right? And we need omega-3s and omega-6s because omega-3 is the lubrication of the cells. Lubrication, omega-3, omega-6, there's omega-7s and 9s. They all mean something. And they directly reflect and play off of arachidonic acid. So when we have too much of omega-6s and not in the right ratio between the omega-3s, we have inflammation. A lot of you, we may have talked and we have removed excess linoleic acid or omega-6s from your diet, and you've seen an incredible improvement in joint pain, in muscle pain. So it's very important to understand those ratios and measure those as well. Refined carbohydrates, we go back to sugar, alcohol. Alcohol can contain a lot of sugar. It can affect our insulin levels. And the problem with that is when we affect our insulin levels, when insulin goes up, we increase aromatase. Aromatase increases estrogen, and men have estrogen too. Estrogen then increases COX-2, which is an inflammatory response, COX-1, COX-2, prostaglandins, and then we increase the prostaglandins. So it's a whole cascade of how we increase this inflammatory response. And then any processed meats. And I hate to say this because we're coming up to the 4th of July and we just passed a holiday. Grilling meat, not so good. Limit, limit, limit. Most of the meats that we put on our grill are processed, and then grilling itself creates a bunch of toxins, and that'll be for another lecture. So right now, I'd like to go over, in particular, about glucose and how this is the main driver for inflammation and disease. And I'll make this a little bit bigger so that we can see it a little bit better. It literally touches every single body system that we have. It just pumps these inflammatory cytokines into our system. It increases this underlying inflammation and autoimmune disease. It makes our symptoms worse. It encourages growth of cancers, cancer cells, viruses, yeasts, and other pathogens. A lot of people who have yeast overgrowth will tell me that they absolutely crave sugar. They're a sugarholic. Once they stop eating sugar, they can't stop because it's food to yeast. And that's one of the ways that you kill yeast is you remove its source of energy. It also causes your DNA to make more mistakes. It has a lot to do with how our body works very appropriately or not appropriately or imbalanced. Again, sugar inflames the lining of the arteries. We talked about that. There's endothelial cells that line those. Endothelial cells and eosinophils and neutrophils and lymphocytes and leukocytes. They're all part of that. They're very, very sensitive to sugar. So at the end of our group class, you will all get a copy of this particular graphic because it's really important. And then, this is a good discussion to have with your kids. Not all sugars are bad, natural sugars. There's a difference between fructose, high fructose corn syrup, processed sugars, things like that. We do need carbohydrates, and sugar is a carbohydrate in order to run our energy. However, it's the quality and the quantity of the sugar that's really, really important. So this is great, and this would be a great thing to talk about with the kids when they want the ho-ho. I had a my youngest son lived on ho-hos, and this was before I really got into what was sugar and what was it doing. He's a young man now, and he understands this. He's transformed his diet significantly. Balancing your stress and cortisol levels. We're not really getting into that kind of discussion today, but emotional stress significantly impacts the secretory IgA in your gut, which is your foundational part of your house to keep you healthy and can lead to leaky gut. So, let's get into our inflammatory risk score. And I want to thank Dr. Laura Salyer for a lot of these graphics. She is a functional medicine mentor of mine, and she has made these. She's very, very talented in the graphic department. So I want to thank her for that. When we get into our private class, we're actually going to take some time to fill this out and come up with an inflammatory risk score. So let's just kind of go through what I want you to look at is, as you notice, these graphics get deeper in color as we go. So we're at a tiny spark, we're smoldering and we're seeing smoke, and then we have a full-on fire when we have more of these particular conditions or lifestyle habits. And if you notice, the majority of 1 point and 2 point items are lifestyle. We haven't even gotten into conditions. We haven't gotten into chronic diseases, because these guys are the building blocks of chronic disease. So this is where you can make the most difference. Understanding where your risks are, understanding where you're out of balance, and then putting a plan together that you can live with, because not everybody can do all of these things. But working within your lifestyle, how you want to live your life and what's more important for you is really what we focus on in functional medicine. And when you're working with me, that's what we do every day. That's why we have a lot of looking at what your MSQ score is. Are we moving in the right direction? Everything affects everything. No mistake that my business logo is a puzzle piece, because they're all interconnected, right? So we'll go through in our group class, we're going to go through these in a detailed fashion, and we are going to come up with a risk score. And then we're going to talk about what are the dietary and lifestyle factors that you can put into place to reverse these, and they can be reversed. I am probably going to be doing a class on type 2 diabetes, insulin resistance, because we're finding that when we significantly limit some carbohydrate intake and increase healthy proteins and fats, and do that with intermittent fasting, we cure a lot of these things. So let's go to the botanicals real quick. The things, and I have a chart of these, and I have specific dosages. I always tell everybody that when we're looking at supplements, what we see on the bottle is a maintenance dose. What I might recommend to you would be a therapeutic dose. And therapeutic doses can be at a higher dosage and increased frequency, but they always should be monitored by someone who understands what these supplements do and what we're looking for. So the botanicals that we're looking at, I'm sure a lot of you heard about turmeric or turmeric, however you want to pronounce it. Um, they're finding now that full spectrum turmeric versus pulling out the curcumin separate. There is a benefit to having those two together, and they help with joint inflammation. Ginger is really good at reducing inflammation as well, but it's also very good with gastric motility and helping relieving constipation and nausea. So I always like these supplements that give me what I call a twofer. You know, I get one benefit, but I get an extra benefit. So that's always nice. Boswellia um, also helps with respiratory. Um, Bromelain helps with asthma and allergies like pineapple. Devil's claw, quercetin. Quercetin is very prominent in organic apples and apples, but you know, I will challenge you all to do a taste test with an organic apple and a traditional apple. The taste difference is significant. And quercetin, and I guess that's where the saying "an apple a day keeps the doctor away," right? Quercetin is very anti-inflammatory. And then cayenne peppers, heat. We are now seeing a lot of topical uh, joint anti-inflammatories with cayenne in it. Capsaicin is the extraction from cayenne. And so we see that, and it also is a good gut clearer as well. And probably the one that I prescribe the most is ECGC or green tea. And I'll have a handout for you of all of these. I can't give you the therapeutic doses, but I can tell you what they're used for and the food sources for them. So green tea, decaffeinated green tea, um, is very, very helpful in hormone regulation, decreasing inflammation worldwide, body-wide detoxification. And so what I tell people to drink is 4 cups of decaffeinated green tea a day. So what I really like is, I don't think I have it with me today, but I have a very, very large 6-cup mason jar, and I brew my green tea in the morning, and I have enough green tea for 2 days. I put it in the refrigerator. I can add lemon to it. I can use it in my smoothies as my base liquid so I can get my green tea. Some people like the caffeine in the green tea because it does have some caffeine in it. However, when we're dealing with people who have adrenal fatigue, chronic fatigue, limiting caffeine is really important. So only in some circumstances would I recommended a caffeinated green tea. And I am a very slow metabolizer of caffeine, which means that it takes my body a very long time to clear caffeine. And so 1 or 2 cups of caffeine a day can keep me going and have the effects of caffeine for several hours, up to 6 or 8 hours. So I have to be very careful of my caffeine intake. So I'm excited that we are going to do a little bit of deeper dive into this in our closed group setting, because this is a really important part of our immune system. And we are putting it under stress every single day with the choices that we make in what we eat and how we conduct our life. So I look forward to seeing you in the closed group. Get your questions ready, get your pencil ready. We are going to do our inflammatory risk score, and then we'll have a really good discussion.